Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and as usual, here to I should introduce myself every once in a while. Always forget to introduce myself. As usual, here to introduce all of you listeners to something new and provide some context along the way, hopefully. In today's episode, Sona and I will be breaking down the latest episode of The White Lotus, Season 3, Episode 1, the premiere episode of this new season of television. Highly anticipated. I'll get into a little bit of the history of this show. And the name of the episode is Same Spirits, New Forms. Sona, I got a lot of Same Spirits, New Forms vibes from this show, this episode.
Is that right?
Yeah, mini critique at this moment. This might all be by design, by the way, but I did feel like I am watching this show in season 3, and I'm like, oh, that's like that in season 1. Oh, that's like that in season 2. So, because this is a lot of
Interesting. I guess I was so busy trying to get to know everyone and keep track of everyone that maybe I didn't get to that level with it because I did not have that feeling.
a couple of things to touch on before we get going, since maybe some listeners are coming back to just this coverage. We are covering Paradise, very popular, by the way, on the podcast. It's gotten more and more popular every week, which indicates to me,
Fantastic.
as usual, that this is one of those shows that grew over time. This is kind of what's happened to us, honestly, with all of these shows we've had. I'll talk about the White Lotus in just a moment, but for example, Severance, and even our very first hit, if you want to call it that, here on the podcast, Sona, when we were discussing Mayor of Easttown, and unexpectedly the popularity of that show. And you can really see it happening, like week over week, that something is happening with the listenership, and of course also with the popularity of the show. That's happening with Paradise again. Only 3 more episodes. We'll have one coming up just this week, and then 2 more. So catch up if you are curious about that show. It's been fun so far. It's a silly show oftentimes, but that's part of the pleasure of watching it, to be honest. And of course, we continue to cover Severance, which is extremely popular. I think the most popular show on television right now, and definitely the most viral. And when that show episode drops, there is immediately memes all over the internet seconds afterwards. So a very buzzy show, to say the least. An acquired
Hmm.
taste, but I guess that's part of the popularity of a show like that. It requires a certain amount of dedication to get into it. And then, of course, that just leads to obsession. And there are definitely many people who are severely obsessed with that show. I'm somewhat obsessed with the show, but not fully. But there are some people who they could probably start their own Lumen cult if they really wanted to, with the the level of fixation that some people have on this show. And we continue. We're only halfway through the season on that one. A very eventful first 5 episodes. Oh, by the way, thank you to one of the YouTubers out there who mentioned to me that I had labeled the episode 6. I didn't do that to scam people into clicking on the YouTube link. And it didn't
What a
seem to
great
do that.
idea that would be.
It would have been, right? But by the way, it didn't seem to work, because after I corrected the title, we got about the same number of listeners before and after. As a matter of fact, we had a huge spike in listeners on YouTube. That was exciting. But thank you for shouting it out. I fixed it on all the feeds because it was wrong on all the feeds, on the podcast feeds as well. So it's all fixed now.
I
But
like your consistency.
I have to say, I got confused because I'm literally, filling in the feed as I'm publishing the episodes. And I saw Paradise episode 5, and then I'm just in my head incrementing by one. And I'm like, no, no, no. It's episode 5 for that show. Also episode 5 for this show. Too many shows we're covering right now. But we'll be down to 2 and then just 1, just a few more weeks. Just stay tuned for all of that. Of course, Sona and I covering that show. A few other things. Email us, of course, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com. Or communicate with us via YouTube. I also check the YouTube comments. Speaking of YouTube, Sona, I had a challenge to the audience. If we have 100 subscribers on YouTube, we will do a video episode. And I announced this last week, and we got to 20 subscribers. And then I mentioned it again in our Severance recap. And now, Sona, we're up to 30. I did tell the listeners we'd keep count of where we are at with that goal. So we did get to 30 just this morning. So I
Nice.
mentioned it again because maybe the next time we meet, Sona, we'll be at 40. Let's see how the pattern continues.
Fingers crossed. I'll start picking out my wardrobe.
That's right. Get ready for, we'll have to style ourselves for that, be on our best appearance, hopefully. That's about it. If you would like to support the show in any other way, the easiest way to support us is just recommend us to your friends and family. Are you watching this show with somebody? Encourage that watch together by suggesting they listen to the podcast. You could use that as a point of reference in discussing these shows. I oftentimes hear from people in the actual wild, people who are friends or friends of friends who actually do listen to the podcast, that they all basically say, and I think this is how I use podcasts myself, to be honest. They're like, well, my friends aren't watching this show, so I listen to your show. I feel like I have somebody else I'm watching the show with.
Ah,
And I think that is the goal to a large extent of what this show is about. So I do hope that you enjoy our content, and I do hope it helps you enjoy the shows we're covering. And of course, just kicking off this season of The White Lotus. A few questions to you, Sona. I don't want to do a beat by beat breakdown of this plot,
okay.
considering the structure of the episode. So maybe I'll talk about the groups of characters and tell me your level of interest in each one of these subsets. But before we get to even that, first things first, the theme song. I have to say, I am not skipping this theme song in any of the upcoming watches. This is my favorite version of this
It's
crazy
my
theme song.
favorite version too. I agree. In fact, I never really understood the affection for the prior versions. I found them mildly disturbing. Maybe that was part of the appeal. But this one I really could get into.
Yeah, I love the tone setting. I literally just listened to it right now, right before we started, when I was scrubbing through the episode, and I rewound the musical sequence. I have to find out if they have this as an extended mix on Spotify or something. I will probably listen to it multiple times today.
I
I've
love it. I
always
love
liked
the idea of you at home jamming out to
just
the
jamming to this. And
White
that's the thing I
Lotus
like about it
theme
is that
song.
I have actually liked all of these theme songs. But like you mentioned, especially for season one, you really can't get down to the song. It's like there are some dark tones in there as it
Yeah.
progresses. But I love just the sound design of it. But this one has all of that, and it like turns into a total jam at the end. But it has this like ethereal sound, like it's which I think a theme here of spiritual questing that's going to develop over the course of this season, and it's in the music as well. Like it goes from that moody beginning to that total jam about three-quarters of the way through, and then it ends on this tone of like enlightenment or like the sound just opening up. And I was like, wow, this is great. They've really
Yeah.
upped every production element of this show.
I agree. They've really got something with this one.
And speaking of that, another compliment I want to make. First season of White Lotus, and maybe I'll get into the history of it a little bit. Sona, by the way, in the history of this podcast, a huge miscalculation I made. We wrapped up The Mayor of Easttown, which had been one of HBO's most popular shows of all times, and our podcast had just launched within a month earlier or 2 months earlier when that show came out.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of listeners. And immediately, 1 week after Mayor of Easttown ended, they debuted The White Lotus. And I was like, we should do The White Lotus, right? Because it's the next big HBO show. And the premiere ratings after Mayor of Easttown had wrapped up with, I think, the biggest ratings ever for any HBO drama, first season of HBO drama. They premiered 1 week later, The White Lotus, and it had 1/4 of a million viewers. So, no, 1/4 of a million viewers. And I was like, oh man, we dodged a bullet. No one's watching that crap. But boy, was I wrong. By the end of season one, that show had become a huge hit. And in between seasons grew even more. And then season two of The White Lotus was a phenomena. I think they have averaged around 17 million viewers for that show. And that was while it was on the air. So I'm sure it's grown since then. So all that is to say that they have quite a successful formula on their hands. But Sona, if we had done that, if we had ridden the wave of that show going from nothing to becoming a huge word of mouth success, our podcast would probably be at least twice as big as it is right now, at least probably more.
Well, hindsight is 2020,
Of
first of
course.
all. And I think we did discuss the first season of it at some
We
point
did after
on
the
the
fact. Mm-hmm.
podcast. I didn't love that first
I
season
know
the
you
way
didn't. Yeah.
many did, So I'm not sure. People might have been like, why does this lady keep talking about how much she hates this show?
But maybe you would have liked it more if we were talking our way through it.
Maybe, but I mean, to me, I enjoyed the second season 10 times more easily than the first.
I completely agree, by the way. Season two of The White Lotus is way better than season one.
Yeah.
Season one was a show, and we just did discuss this briefly on the podcast when the show ended. I think we were talking about Nine Perfect Strangers, actually, which would have been once again, we would have dovetailed directly from that into Nine Perfect Strangers, would have been a very good synergy between those two shows. Again, missed opportunity, but let's not dwell on that. Regardless, that's all on me, by the way. I'm not putting that on you at all. We never even discussed covering that show at the time. It was just something in the back of my mind. We did discuss it at wrap up, and I felt the same way to an extent as you did, where I did reluctantly end up liking that show and actually liked it more the more distance I had from it. When I was watching it week to week, I felt it was so smug in its opinion of its characters.
Very shallow. I felt there was
Yes,
not enough examination of things.
right. I felt like it was judging these cartoonish characters and not, like you said, not humanizing them enough. And
Yeah.
then in the 11th hour, trying to correct some of that. But I did come back to that show after the fact many times and think about it. And I did think it was better than it was in the experience of it. And mostly it's because of where it landed. I think it did in those last couple of episodes, did humanize those characters and give them this empathy that it had really smugly not given it
Hmm.
earlier. That's my opinion. I know it probably didn't work as well for you. To that point, I think that even then a lot of that humanization of those characters was because the performances were absolutely incredible across all these shows, basically, but incredible in season one. So even when the writing wasn't quite humanizing them, the actors gave you more than was probably on the page.
Yeah, a lot of great acting in that first season. I can't deny that.
With season two, the immediate, like with episode one, the immediate hook of that show, not only in the fact that it was a little more playful, it wasn't as cynical in its view of its characters. And this is something that I'm not sure they're going to be able to pull off with this season of the show so far. It's still early, but the chemistry of that cast, like I loved every character in that show.
Hmm.
I loved all the actors and all the performances of the three generations of the Italian men traveling together. I loved this toxic friend dynamic of these two couples that were
The
traveling
best,
together.
the
I
best.
loved the girls who worked at the hotel and
Hmm.
the singer and her friend, like the prostitute. I
Yeah.
loved those girls. They were incredible. So I loved everybody in that show, like immediately. And I haven't gotten that love for these characters out of the gate here with episode one.
Okay, I think I'm further ahead on that than you are.
Okay. Oh, but I do want to say one more complimentary thing there before we get into some of this breakdown. In season one, they shot it during COVID. It was shot very quickly. Mike White wrote all the scripts and directed all the episodes. He did it all himself. He lives out in Hawaii. So HBO called him up and says, "Hey, is there anything you could come up with that we can shoot socially distanced?" He goes, "Hey, I've already lived down here in Hawaii. Hawaii doesn't have all these as many COVID protocols at the time because their COVID numbers were incredibly low. Bring everybody here in my own backyard and we'll shoot everything here." And he shot and he wrote all these episodes, 6 episodes. And by the way, 6 episodes for season one because of spoiler alert, something happens there. Not too surprising given the pattern of the show. But if you haven't seen season one, the 1 week vacation gets cut short. So it only is 6 days. Season two, the full 7 days. And now season three is 8 days. So it's
Hmm.
gotten progressively longer. I don't know if that's going to be good for the show or not. But I do think that the 7 days was good for the show in season two.
I agree.
As I mentioned, this is all written really quickly, shot very quickly, and very much thinking about COVID protocols. Even though they're in this beautiful, like you could see these beautiful Hawaiian vistas, we never explore them because all the shooting was done on a very small scale, really like within a resort. And I think I mentioned to you this at the time, Sona, but they even thought about the way they blocked the scenes where like the husband and wife would be talking to each other in one room. And if someone tested positive for COVID, you could almost just like hop into another room and those two people could be
Hmm.
isolated together and do all their scenes. So it was really done for the purposes of something you can shoot under COVID protocols. And maybe that's why the show felt a little less lived in. And then, of course, they have the success of season one. He gets an upgrade to his budget. I think he himself gets better as a filmmaker and as a showrunner. The Italian season, I mean, that was just beautiful, like sumptuous, like incredible.
Gorgeous.
And now I think they've upped their game even again. Just the opening sequence here, not only just seeing these incredible, I mean, like Thailand is now definitely on my bucket list. These absolutely stunning vistas here. Just the opening shot of the pull focus as we see the monkeys in the trees. Like they have obviously have enough money now to even spend who knows like a day out in the forest shooting the
Right.
monkeys just for that shot. So they
Mhm.
have HBO has unlocked all the funds basically for them, and it shows. This is like incredible. This is the most travel porn-ish version of this show, I think, at this point.
I don't know. I would put it on par with Italy for me right now.
I'm talking about more from the production of the show, like even with the, but I agree that like the beauty of it. Yes. I mean, I definitely want to go to that villa in Italy as well after seeing season one or season two, I should say. My first question to you, Sona, given all the caveats that I just outlined there, which of the three White Lotus resorts are you most likely to want to visit?
What a fun question. I think for me right now, it would be Italy. The Hawaiian one looked absolutely gorgeous, but I've been to Hawaii before, although not to Maui, which is, I believe, where that hotel was. So that is tempting. And I have not been to Southeast Asia at all, actually, but I really, really, really hate to fly. So
It's
the
quite a
idea
flight. Yes.
of spending that long on a plane is enough
Oof, it's
to
true.
tilt the balance in favor of Italy for me. Plus, although I'm sure the Thai food is delicious, I love, love, love Italian food.
True. I love Thai food more than Italian food, I have to say. So
Really? Wow.
I don't like pasta, but I do have to say that pasta in Italy was a different thing. Like when I was like, oh, this is why people like pasta. Pasta out of a box, like even when you eat it at a restaurant, it's probably coming out of a box. It just, I never, liked it, to be honest. And then
I
we
don't
ate.
even know who you are anymore. Wow.
I know you love pasta. I
All
try to avoid
these
it.
years, decades, and I never knew this about you.
I know, isn't it a surprise? But I have to say, when we were in Rome, even at some little mom and pop shop near the Colosseum, like just some little restaurant that we scooted into because they had a lunch special, the pasta was absolutely delicious. I mean, of course, eating Greek food in Greece when we were there and eating Italian food in Italy, a very different experience. Just all that is to say. So, could you imagine? Because I love Thai food anyway. Could you imagine eating Thai food in Thailand? Must be delicious.
Hmm.
So for me at the moment, I mean, I need to see more of the resort, but first, like I'm just basing the arrival of all three. I'm going Thailand just for the vista,
Okay.
the incredible vista there. I'd say, based on day one. Although I might change my opinion over the course of the show because I really did like the idea of, seeing, oh, I can't remember the actor's name now, who would go for a run every week, every day at the beginning of
Ethan, yeah.
Ethan. Yeah, seeing
I don't
Ethan in
remember the actor's name either.
Will Sharp, seeing that him go for a run in Italy, it feels more approachable. Like I honestly feel like if I was wandering into town, like the girl in this episode, to go check out the monastery, I might want to go with like some traveling companions. Maybe it's because I understand Italian a little bit. But I would be a little more comfortable just wandering around the villas of Italy, I think, and that makes it a little more approachable. All right, so let's just talk about the opening scene. We'll break this down and then we'll just talk about the dynamics of the characters because I think there's too much jumping around to go scene by scene in this
So
particular
much
episode.
happening.
But the first scene I think is an important one. We see that monkey in the tree, importantly, very evocative, setting this up. We see this young man is having a meditation session with what do you call? You've been to spas before. I know you enjoy very much going to spas. If you have a meditation leader, what is that person called?
Wow, I do not know the name for that. I mean, I suppose if they were very advanced, they might be called a
A
guru,
guru, right?
but
But this is not. Yeah, she's just
yeah, this seems a little bit more at an approachable level than
right.
like going to an ashram and meditating
Right.
and
She's not like, yeah, exactly
some sort of silent retreat or something, you know.
right. No speaking. They can't even
Yeah.
quit their cell phones, much less no speaking.
Oh, the cell phone thing. We have to talk about that. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So this younger man is there. I knew that the Belinda character is coming back from season one. I knew that she was one of the returning characters. I thought they announced she was the only returning character. We're going to get to it towards the end of this breakdown, but no, there's someone else here. Sona, very
Big
intriguingly,
surprise.
another
Yes.
character here from before, from season one and season two.
Yes.
But Belinda's son. So we heard Belinda at one point, one of the most heartbreaking memories of season one. She thinks that she's going to actually get this money
Hmm.
from the Jennifer Coolidge character. And then she backs out and she's on the phone and her son's telling her, "Oh, you deserve this, mom." But this is the son, basically, is what it comes down
Hmm.
to. We figure it out during the course of the conversation. I'm here to visit my mom. She's really into wellness. It's kind of her job. So we kind of figure that out. I did like this cutaway, by the way, that when he was talking about the monkeys, that this meditation leader, she starts off with like, "Let's quiet those chittering monkey brains." And they cut to the monkey, like looking
Hmm.
at them like, "What are you talking about, lady? I'm just sitting here in this tree. You're the one who's doing all the talking." They start their meditation. And then he notices some sounds in the distance. Not that far off, by the way. And she's just like, "Oh, try to ignore the sounds of the forest. Those aren't sounds of the forest. That's gunfire." And as soon as literally piercing the pottery and stuff inside of their little area, he's worried for his mom, working his way across through this lake or through this pond, whatever it would be, towards where the gunfire is coming from. He runs into some other people who are there from the resort as well, not characters we're going to see later on, that we not in this first episode anyway. He gets closer, we hear a woman screaming, and we see the back of someone's head. Someone's body is floating in the water.
Hmm.
And that's where we jump back 7 days, because that's the pattern here with this show now. What do you think about this opening mystery compared to, let's not even talk about season one, where we just see the casket being loaded onto the plane. In season two, of course, we have those multiple bodies washing up on shore very disturbingly in that opening
Hmm.
sequence on the beach. What do you think about this first mystery? And do you want to even posit who that could possibly be?
I would never at this early stage hazard a guess as to who it could be. But it did, make me think about how the prior season started and then about the actual deaths in the prior seasons
Yeah.
and how it seems like something that should be, I don't know, like super dark and awful. But in fact, like kind of the thing about the White Lotus is there's always something a little bit quirky about the death, right?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then, I kind of was thinking like, oh, what quirky thing could result in this happening? Also, there seems to be something going on with the son where he's like, I'm under a lot of stress,
Yeah.
exams, other stuff. And that made
Other
me
stuff.
think,
Yeah.
what's the other stuff?
Right.
And final thought on this is from my experience going to India, monkeys cannot be trusted. They're cute and whatnot, but monkeys can be, and I think someone makes a throwaway comment during this episode too. They can be kind of vicious.
Aggressive.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
watch out for a
Yeah.
monkey. Don't trust a monkey. They will take your stuff, and I think they might have opposable thumbs, which I think is the
They
real
do.
threat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Always.
their dexterity is it's serious. It's like human level dexterity, at least child level. So yeah, I'm a little nervous about the abundance of monkeys.
Oh, you know what? I just thought of something. First of all, I forgot to mention the opening title sequence, which I like to break down. I don't want to break it down yet because I barely know these characters, but there were definitely some clues in earlier seasons where
Yes.
certain people's names were on the screen and certain things were symbolically shown. But there is a moment in that title sequence where you see these people up on some kind of watchtower, and the monkeys are climbing the watchtower towards them, like aggressively, to your point.
Yeah, they
And
can be very aggressive.
there's somebody, I forget who it is, one of the characters mentions here that don't feed the monkeys because they can be very aggressive. And absolutely true, by the way. Like, I've only been surrounded by monkeys outside of like a safari or something, like a artificial safari, when we went to Gibraltar and they have the wild monkeys on there. And
So many
these
monkeys at Gibraltar.
these people try to like pull out a banana or something, and these monkeys are going through their bags, going through their
So
cars.
fast.
It's like, you people do not feed the damn monkeys and lock your
I
doors
mean,
and close your windows because they'll get in your car and like ransack everything.
the signs are there. Don't feed the monkeys.
They're there for a reason.
Last thought I had about this, not related to the monkeys. I thought it was interesting, at least the way this was presented to me. I would not have recognized those sounds as gunshots as
Right.
fast
Not at first, for sure. Yeah.
as this character did. I mean, I think we're to believe that his background is such that he's familiar with the sound of gunshots.
Right.
For me, it did not strike me as gunshots immediately, and especially the quantity of them was surprising. It was a lot of shots.
Yeah, I think that initially when you just hear those first few pops and he immediately reacts to it, I wouldn't have recognized it there either. But yeah, when the next round of, they start
Right,
being like pop, 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 and you hear the
right.
echoing in the woods, then you're like, well, that definitely is gunfire. Good point you bring up that he does seem to be vigilant about hearing that initially. Oh, because you brought up the monkeys, I'm sure over the course of the show, to your point, another formula here with the season, it makes you feel like, well, this person's going to want to kill that person. And we already see here in season one that there might be some nefarious cross, like if people knew the identities of the people that they are interacting with, those particular people may be in danger. But it did make me think about how wild that shooting is, and hearing that woman just screaming almost comically in the background. And you bring up the monkeys. At first, I was thinking, could you imagine someone like the Parker Posey character, the most hysterical character here in the show so far that we've identified, freaking out and brandishing a gun
Mm,
and shooting at the monkeys and accidentally
mm,
killing somebody, right?
mm-hmm,
But then, as you were describing monkeys and their opposable thumbs, etc.,
mm-hmm.
I'm like, I think about, a monkey is reaching for the bananas in my purse. If there's some characters carrying a gun around with her, pulls out a gun, and the safety's off and just starts squeezing off rounds. And that could be why we're seeing this completely wild gunfire here as well. So
Would a
maybe the monkeys are the
monkey,
clue to all this.
I mean, you do require some strength, some pressure to pull the trigger. Do you think a monkey can exert that amount of force?
I think monkeys can shoot a gun. They're very strong. So they're probably stronger
Hmm,
than humans. They have strong enough hand grip to swing and grab trees. So
true,
they definitely have that
true,
kind of. Now, do they have the manual dexterity? I would assume so. They can't be that complicated. I mean, if a child can pull a trigger on a gun, so can
true.
a monkey.
Okay, working theory. The monkeys did it.
Monkeys did it exactly. But did they have an agenda? Are they organizing? It's hard
Is
to.
it an organization? Yes.
Is this a prequel to one of those Planet of the Apes
Premeditated.
movies? We'll have to see what their intentions are.
The monkeys finally hit their limit of American tourists.
They're like, we are sick of these damn tourists. And we jump back, as I said, 1 week before, which is again a formula here at the show. We see some beautiful shots of the boat approaching. The boat itself
Mhm.
is beautiful. The
Yes.
water is beautiful. This is just this is like a commercial for Thailand, I'm sure. I wouldn't be surprised at some point if these places become incredibly popular tourist destinations and start vying with HBO to be like, hey, shoot where we are. We'll give you
For
some extra
sure.
perks because it'll probably be great for our travel industry. Made in Thailand is playing on the soundtrack, a recognizable Thailand song. It's been used in a lot of these shows set in this area or movies as well. And everybody arrives at the resort, the usual type of shtick. I'm actually going to leave the family, the biggest group, for last. And let's kind of, because some of these dynamics are a little easier to explore before we spend some
Yeah.
time with that family. So, first of all, I'm going to start off with these three ladies. They're approaching middle age. Michelle Monaghan looking absolutely beautiful. And we just saw her in A Bad Monkey. I think she was even more stunning in that, to be honest. And I think it's
Hmm.
a little bit intentional. She seems a little overdone here, but I think that is intentionally the character she's playing as well. She seems to be someone who's become famous later in life, like in
Hmm.
middle age, probably like a working actress that is suddenly on TV and is famous. People recognize her unprompted. And her friend Leslie Bibb, who's also one of those, been in so many things. We've seen her in, one episode of 1,000 different shows. I can't even place where I've seen her, but I've seen her in everything. And she also, these are childhood friends that are reconnecting in their middle life. And she seems to also have just hit her version of the jackpot here later in life. She's marrying someone who is very wealthy, apparently. Also, someone who gives money to charities, and now apparently she's running that aspect of the business, and she seems to take some pride in it. And then we have Carrie Coon as well, who feels like the outsider. And
Mm-hmm.
it's very telling that at one point where they're talking about, like, we've been so lucky to her. Her character's name is Laurie, by the way. Michelle Monaghan's character is Jacqueline, and Leslie Bibb's character is Kate. The Laurie character, Carrie Coon, when they're complimenting her, they're like, "Oh, I've seen the pictures of your daughter. She's grown up. She looks so beautiful." So she very much seems like she's just been a mom. What'd you think of the dynamic of these three ladies?
I love this. I'm curious about them. I want to know more. Someone had told me once when I was in law school, I was very good friends with my roommates who, incidentally, were not law students, but they were social workers. And so they learned a lot about, psychology and things like that. And one of them had mentioned to me, the three of us are such good friends, but three is actually a very dangerous number for friendships or even in like a sibling structure, because it's so easy for two to bond together and turn against the third one.
Right.
And so
There's
I
always a
had
competition.
that, yeah, I had that in my mind while I was watching them. But, the dynamic of three is very dangerous. And, I like this idea of like these ladies who lunch type women and what darker dynamics they could have between them and darker history they may have. And I want to know more, and I hope there is more. I hope it's not just what we've seen this first episode.
Yeah, if I'm going to make a criticism of the show in general, this is only episode one, of course, and HBO goes week to week, no matter what. I really need a second episode of the show to get a real feel for these characters. There's so much setting up of the
Yeah,
characters here,
so much.
very much just using, like you mentioned, these almost sketches of the dynamics between these characters. I didn't think about this until you just brought up the dynamic of three, which is very telling, by the way. I'm in a situation right now where my daughter has two best friends, and their
Hmm.
dynamic is so different depending on whether it's the three of them or whether it's the two of them. And as
Hmm.
you mentioned, my daughter oftentimes just wants to hang out with one of them at a time. And then that dynamic is very different than when they're in a group of three. And then they can also be a little bit of like bad mouthing and backstabby when
Yep.
they are one on one versus the other, right? So, and like you
Yep.
said, that dynamic shift is constantly happening. And it makes me think about not only that you're absolutely correct that having this triad or this triangle of relationships is definitely something the show is going to play with for certain. It also made me think about maybe my least interesting at the moment, the family, that the group of five.
Same. And I feel like we're going to know too much about this family, and I don't think I want to.
Right. That's why I was going to leave them for last, but I do want
Yeah.
to just put a pin in it for now because you bring up something that I think is interesting, that there is another triangle there. I was seeing them
Hmm.
as the group of five and not thinking about the
The
triangle
siblings.
aspect, but the
Hmm.
siblings, right? That there seems to be a power dynamic play out there with sexual overtones in both directions, which is very creepy, by the
Hmm.
way.
Hmm.
And so I'm curious to see how that plays out. But maybe that is something, maybe White is going to cleverly parallel the dynamic shifts within the triangles. I hadn't really thought about that. So maybe there will be something interesting there, but I'll leave them for near the end. There's one more thing I want to leave for the very, very end, but I'll leave them for near the end because I'm putting my thumb on scale here, but my least interested is probably going to be the most central part of the story.
I have the same feeling.
That's where I have my concerns at this moment.
Yeah, I'm holding my tongue because I have more to say, but you want to
Okay,
get to it later.
yeah,
So,
we'll get to it pretty quickly because I
yeah.
think most of these other ones are pretty fast. I do want to bring up maybe my two favorite performers in the show, although I don't think we know much about them yet. It's the couple here where Walter Goggins, I always love seeing Walter Goggins in anything. I love him in everything. They haven't used him much. He's just doing kind of his thing here so far, playing this character called Rick Hatchett. And we'll find out more about what his allegiances are. And then his girlfriend, I think this is a girlfriend. I'm not sure what the
Yeah, I
relationship
love
is.
these guys too. I'm
Yeah.
with you. I love
And I
them.
especially
Yes.
love Amy Lou Wood is the actress, and the character's name is Chelsea. She's from a show, Sex Education, on Netflix, which I've never watched, but everybody says she's great on there. And I just loved her energy here so much that I
I
want to
agree.
sample that show now just to see more of her. And I have a big question mark. First is, do these people really know each other? Because she is acting like, oh, that is so you. And then at the same time, I feel like they've probably only been together for like a month.
I like this couple. I like their dynamic. She, for whatever reason that I cannot put my finger on, she is my current favorite.
Yes, I love her too.
So,
Yes.
yeah, she just was so likable in this episode. Everything about it. I'm excited, but I will say, and maybe I'm jumping the gun again here, watching him put me in mind of that character that reappears.
Yes.
He had that
Mhm.
kind of
Yep.
same dark energy to him, to me, in my mind, that that character has. And then I started thinking, like, oh, I wonder if those two know each other. This
Right.
is before I even knew about the character reappearing, because they just seemed like the same type of
Yeah.
guy
Mhm.
for whatever reason, like, grouchy with their significant other and having some other plan going on that they're not sharing, right? Because he's asking about the one of the owner's spouses and why he's not at the hotel and seems very agitated and
Mhm.
reminded me a lot of the season one version of that character who reoccurs.
Yes. Two things there is that, especially with season two, it maybe was there with season one also, and I didn't pick up on that as much because I probably didn't analyze it. I mean, obviously we didn't cover it here on the podcast, so I wasn't doing this kind of weekly minutia, sifting through the
Hmm.
themes of the show. But definitely something we saw in season two was a lot of mirroring it within, even within an episode, seeing like a power shift happen, for example, and it'll happen in two different groups at the same time. So there's a lot of mirroring of characters there. In the painting sequence we see in the opening of this, there's a bird looking at its own reflection in the water, something that I think we've
Hmm.
seen in every single one of these opening sequences. So a lot of this like
Interesting.
intentional mirroring between characters. So I think you're absolutely correct. And not only is there this somewhat obvious connection between the dynamic between those two, the girls in those two dynamics
Hmm.
actually end up hanging out together by the end of the episode, right? With another great scene here in the show.
Yes.
I think that that is very intentional, and we're already starting to see some of that dynamic being fleshed out here very early in the show, which is a short season, right? Mike White is pretty quick with the way he develops these character interactions. For sure, there's another interesting dynamic. I feel like this show did a lot of setting up, very little paying off, but that's
Yes.
why I really needed a second episode to get a real
Yeah.
feel. You brought it up, interestingly, of course, he is there primarily not to enjoy the resort at all. And Chelsea seems to not know that that's the case. She really does think like, here's your decision to come here, and now you're complaining about it. It's so
Hmm.
you, but once again, I don't know if she actually knows. So I'm not sure how she knows that it's so him, but I guess she's just a very good reader of people, I guess, possibly. There's this woman we meet, Shritala, who is an owner and former actress in Thailand, apparently pretty famous there. And she's been married to an American. The American, by the way, Sona, did not recognize him from his photographs, only recognized it when I pulled up the IMDb, is Scott Glenn. Scott Glenn has aged a lot, I have to say,
I
since
don't think
Silence of the
I know
Lambs.
who Scott Glenn is.
Remember in Silence of the Lambs, he is
Oh,
Reese's boss. Yeah.
I'm Googling now. Yes. Okay, this guy. Gotcha.
But in the photos, unrecognizable. So, but maybe it's just a bad photo.
Hmm.
So we'll see. And this character's name is Jim Hollinger, who apparently has just left recently. You brought up something that I think is definitely going to develop here. There is some aspect of some corruption. Of course, Thailand, stereotypically, it's kind of considered a lawless area where you can get away with anything. And they even mention it in the coming up on this season. Someone makes a joke that you come to Thailand when you are either a con man or a tax evader, something like that. And maybe this is exactly what we're starting to see play out among some of these Westerners who are visiting. But Rick, the Walt Goggins character, was planning to run into Jim, and he apparently has just left, and he's irritated by the fact that he missed them. But he also wants to meet with Shritala, the owner. So there's much more to be seen there. Sona, you're usually the one who brings up clothing. I have to say that Chelsea's outfit is extremely unflattering.
Oh my gosh, I have no recollection of it.
She the front has like these multiple paddings, like 6 paddings.
Oh yes, now I remember. What is going on with that outfit? It is so strange.
It makes
Yeah.
her breasts look terrible, and the cutouts on her hips make her waist look boxy. I've never really broken down anybody's wardrobe on this podcast before, but man, this is an unflattering outfit, I have to say. And
I don't
she's a beautiful woman, by the way. I'm just saying that, this outfit
agree.
is not flattering her at all.
I don't know that it struck me so much as unflattering as just strange. Very strange.
Yes, very strange. That this is what you would wear on the arrival at the island? I don't know.
Yeah, very strange.
Can you make heads or tails of this relationship? What do you suspect?
Ah, the parallel that they're drawing, right, when she meets the woman at the bar, is that it's the similar dynamic is going
Chloe.
on between Chloe and Chelsea and their respective. She calls Chloe calls them LBH, right? Losers back home.
Right.
I think we're supposed to assume it's a similar dynamic. And I said, it struck me as something similar because that guy reminded me of the other guy.
Right.
That's where I'm at with it right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's more going on than that.
Yeah, I mean, it almost felt like a kept woman, whether it is actually someone whose time you're paying for formally, or whether I mean, really, definitely with the Chloe character, it's like a sugar daddy type situation, you'd think. She does not seem to like Greg at
Yeah.
all. I'll just say that it's Greg, since we assume everybody's seen the show. So yeah, it does seem to be a very similar dynamic. But in this particular case, either she's playing really well at this. I mean, it's hard. That's why I'm trying to get a beat on this. I don't know if she's playing along like, oh, that's so you,
Yeah.
complaining about the consequences of your own actions, but there's some level of facetiousness to it. So she seems to be playing this role of being like the happy-go-lucky girl, and all of it is a ruse. I'm very curious to see how this plays out as it goes forward. Okay, next up, I just wanted to bring up quickly, Belinda's back, Natasha Rothwell, always this very charming and warm presence
Hmm.
here. She mentions early on that her son is going to be visiting as well. She's staying for 3 months, which is pretty nice, although she's working that time,
Hmm.
but not a bad place to be working, all things considered.
Although she came from Maui, so.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point, right? You're going from one luxury to another. And I have some other speculation about her, but let's leave it to the end until we talk about Greg. Oh, but one thing I really enjoyed about her, adding some shading to her character, we saw her as really this wounded, very tender, open-hearted, wanting to believe the best qualities in people, and has this warm, sincere impression she gives. It's very funny in this show so far. She completely loses any kind of composure when she thinks there's a wild animal around.
True.
She freaks out when there's a monkey, freaks out when she sees a lizard. The employee who's showing her around tells her, oh, you'll get used to them. And she's like, I don't think so. She goes running to her cabana at the end of the night. She goes like, no snake is going to fall on top of me.
I'm with
So,
her.
I mean, she comes from Hawaii, but I mean, of course they have many wild animals, but I guess she's on the resort. They don't have creatures roaming around.
And I feel like Hawaii animals are more like colorful birds and
Right. No monkeys, though. No monkeys.
no monkeys that I've heard of.
And we meet on the beach some of the staff. There's a whole bunch of staff. I'll focus on a few of them. Of course, we meet Shritala. What did you think about her? She seems that she was a famous actress, married an American. They've opened this resort probably quite some time ago. Did you get a feel for her at all?
I didn't, which at least based on this first episode makes me think she's just kind of a means to an end as far as being a channel for the husband,
Right.
who is going to be the real point of this plot.
Yeah, there's a lot of characters here. Some of them I don't even want to shout out because I don't think they're going to develop much over the course of the show, unfortunately, as you would expect with these type of things. I mean, you have to have these secondary characters. Next up, I wanted to bring up Fabian. This is the head of staff. This is usually a very juicy role in this show. Still very early. I have no real impression of this person at all. However, this is Christian Friedel, the German actor who was the star of Zone of Interest just a year ago, one of the best movies of that year, that Holocaust film based on historical events. So this is definitely going to be a big part, and you're getting somebody who is just making a name for himself. I got very little of anything from him so far.
Agree. As far as hotel staff, we were much more centered on Mook and
Mook,
her
yes.
friend. Yes.
And then, of course, we have some of these, some attractive people here who, Valentine, for example, is, I don't know if you actually saw that little segment afterwards, which is like this season on the White Lotus, but
I
the
did.
Cougars are going to pounce
Yes.
on him at some point. So basically set up right at the start. Once again, we know nothing about this character, but I completely agree. The character out of this group of staff we are going to focus on the most is going to be Mook and her relationship, kind of a toxic flirtation she has with this Guy Talk character who appears to be just a policeman in town, right?
It wasn't clear to me who he is, honestly. I kind of thought he worked at the hotel. He doesn't?
I don't think because he's making fun of the security guards. I think he's just one of the. But you know what? No, you might be right. That might be private security, and he might be
Those were
security.
bodyguards. They
Right,
specifically said bodyguards.
right. You might be right though, because when he's talking about the adventures he's had on the job, he mentions he saved some American from drowning, and that person
Right,
still
right,
writes to him.
right.
I thought it because we don't see him on the grounds. He always seems to be running into her outside of the grounds, but maybe it's still part of the security for the resort. It just extends into the town around the resort, which makes sense as well.
Hmm.
Also makes sense that they are constantly running into each other as they walk in and out. So he seems to be stationed near the resort at all times. Like you mentioned, we really don't know much about anybody here, but they spend a lot of time, at least 3 or 4 scenes in just this one episode in the interactions between Mook and Gaitak. And what did you think about her character, Mook?
She's likable, and I do think we're going to learn more about her. I mean, right now she strikes me as kind of the principal hotel employee who we're going to learn more about, and she's going to have more of her own plot. I liked her enough. What did you think?
I mean, I don't know enough about her yet. I actually found her interactions with this security guard to be pretty negative, considering
Yeah,
she's comparing him constantly to
yeah,
these other guys and forcing him to feel inferior and feel bad about his status. But
yeah.
we know always with a smile on their face and always very thankful of all the help she's given. And by the way, in that kind of scenes from the season featurette that comes on afterwards, their dinner conversations seem to be very, negative as well. So I think that seems to be the character she's playing. I don't know. It's a little early to tell. I do hope that they give her more motivation than that, just being like a femme fatale.
Fair.
So one more staff member. I'm sure we'll spend a lot more time with her. We didn't spend that much time with her here in this episode, but I do want to shout her out for a couple of reasons. One, it's this Australian actress, Morgana O'Reilly, who starred in this really hilarious horror comedy from Australia called Housebound, which I've recommended on the podcast before. The director of that film is now directing the Megan film, so he's made it to the big times. But that first film is really hilarious, and she's great in it as this total screw up teenager is housebound. She's like basically under house arrest in a house that is haunted, so she can't leave the house. So all those jokes of like, well, why doesn't she just leave the house? She's trapped in her house with her mother, and she can't leave because she's under house arrest. So it's a very entertaining film. Anyway, so here she is 10 years later now on the White Lotus. I'm sure we'll know more about her, but here she mostly has to suffer this really insufferable family, and we'll use this as a segue to talk about the Ratliffs.
I mean, I loved her because she just went into it with like, this is the company line and I'm here to sell it to you.
Right.
This is the point of you being here, right? So let me try and articulate this in a way that will come across for you. And by the end, I felt like she just reached resignation, of just fine, do what you're going to do. Just don't bring your phones to the common areas, please.
Which, of course,
Um,
they can't even do that.
right.
But what do you think about the family itself? I had the most trouble with this. I felt it was a little too repetitive to the other seasons of the show, and also a little too stereotypical. Everything's stereotypical in the show, I think. Too much stereotypical, too little freshness to it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I know this is the question you initially asked me, and I just decided not to answer it. Was there a family on the Italy season? I mean, Michael Imperioli's character, that were a
Right.
family, but a different kind of family. Was there a family like this? I'm not recalling it.
I'm thinking of season one of The White
Sure.
Lotus,
Yes.
and I'm
Yeah,
thinking
there
of,
for sure.
yeah, in season two, I agree. I think that was good for the show. That would have been very repetitive if they had that same dynamic over and over again. This show
Yeah.
in general at this moment makes me think more of season one.
I get what you're saying. I don't want to say I like this family better because I'm not sure I like either of these families.
Right.
And I do, as I already mentioned, this is the group I'm least interested in.
Right.
And I'm concerned because I feel like I'm supposed to be most interested in them. And I feel like I'm just going to learn a lot against my will about this family.
Right.
I have those negative feelings that, are somewhat what you're saying. On the other hand, I do like the dad character, kind of like a John Hamm feel to him
Mm.
for me. I enjoy watching this actor. I'm not sure what else he's been in and whether I've seen it, but I enjoyed watching this actor. Whatever he's going on with his white collar crime that seems to be happening. I have a soft spot in my heart for Parker Posey
Yes.
because, I just love her as like the indie film chick from when we were growing up. And I once ran into her in a hotel in New Orleans and she was lovely. So I will always have a soft spot for Parker Posey. These kids, on the other hand, very annoying.
Yes.
Yeah, I do think they are supposed to be like an American stereotype, giving all this information about the family, right? That nobody really cares about.
Right.
This one got into Duke and UNC, and what's he going to do? But I did relate to the dad when they're at dinner, and the daughter says, like, "Yeah, I'm going to set up the meeting with a monk tomorrow," and the dad is like, "What do you mean? You didn't do that before we got
You
here?"
went all the way there. Not only
Yeah.
that, you were physically there today, by the way, too. So, and
Yeah, I'm on his side there. It's the dynamic between the kids is very off-putting to me. But
yes.
as far as like this stereotypical American thing, unfortunately, I do relate to the alarm and not having Wi-Fi. I too would
Yes.
panic if there was no Wi-Fi. Also, my phone is my primary camera, so I would also be alarmed at the instruction to not take my phone to common areas because surely I'm going to want to take photos of things when I'm out and about at the beach, at the pool. So this was an exaggerated version of that, but I could relate to the alarm at that. And then I'm also wondering, have they all decided to just like, there's no Wi-Fi? Are they all on roaming? Because this cell phone bill is going to be crazy.
Good point.
What were your thoughts? And let's not even talk about the sexual issues here first.
We might have to by the end. All of this, the dynamic here, this is where I'm bumping up against the show right now. But first of all, Jason Isaacs, which I agree in general, like him a lot in shows. He's playing the father, Timothy. I've seen him. He's been in 100 shows, but another one of those guys who never had like a show that ran for 10 years. He had like a bunch of shows that ran for like 1 year each. He's a British actor and he has this crazy American, Southern accent, as does Parker Posey, who in general, huge fan. I loved seeing her in Mrs. and Mrs. Smith, Mr. and Mrs. Smith past year.
Mm-hmm.
And, she's been kind of gone for a little while. So I was kind of glad to see her back. Very excited to see her here. Again, it's like so over the top. And you see her in the behind the scenes. That is not her persona when she's doing these interviews to the camera. Maybe they want someone way over the top to make up for the lack of Jennifer Coolidge, of course. But
Mm.
it was a little too much. She's high
With
all
the
the
Laura
time.
Azepam references,
Yeah,
yeah.
she's sleeping at the wrong times, and all of
Hmm.
it is just a little too silly for me.
I get that.
But honestly, nothing is worse than the kids, right? First of all, you have
Agree.
Saxon, who's played by Patrick Schwarzenegger, speaking of season one, he's giving huge Jake Lacey vibes here. So definitely referencing back to that character. Know it all, a blandly handsome white dude who,
Finance bro.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Who apparently just like, he thinks he's like the king of the world and just works for his dad. So all these things we've seen in previous seasons of this very show. I've only seen him in a few things. I actually think he has like a pretty interesting charisma. Not here. Like it just isn't working for me. at all in this show. And maybe that's intentional, right? Because this is all we will assume over the course of the show to be all pretense, right? Maybe that's intentional, but it's so much putting the thumb on the scale of making him so utterly unlikable early on. There's no place to go for the character in some ways for me. And maybe I'm wrong. It just was off putting, but not in a good way. Not like, oh, I can't wait for that guy to get his comeuppance. I'm just like, I don't want to see this guy on screen. I just don't want to deal with him right now. And then, of course, we have the younger siblings, Piper, who maybe we're supposed to be sympathetic to her because she's within this family that is like so confident of themselves. And she's like a searcher and she wants to be a Buddhist. It seems to be that she's like going to actually have that conversation with her family in the next episode based on those scenes. And they're going to freak out about it. That's not that compelling for me as far as character
Agree.
goes. And she is just so wishy-washy. Like her dad's probably right about her. If you're so committed to this, then why aren't you doing anything about it even now?
I mean, she goes to the temple and she doesn't even go in.
Doesn't even go in. Exactly. Like what you waiting for? They're only there for a week. It's
Right.
so crazy. What if they like, oh, we need 3 or 4 days ahead to make time with the monk? She's could run out of time just because she didn't bother going in there.
She didn't bother sending an email a week ago.
Exactly. So her dad's right. Her dad, that's where the dynamic's a little bit interesting, where he kind of looks at his family and he doesn't really like any of them. His wife's a little annoying. His older son's kind of a jerk and he knows it. He doesn't have the dynamic of being like, yeah, son, you're the coolest. He's kind of like rolling his eyes at his. He feels like the younger kids don't know what they're doing at all. He really seems to dislike his family, honestly. But then, of course, we're already seeing that he's, maybe his mythology is about to collapse as well. So maybe he's not the person he envisions as well. So maybe he's got more in common with them that he chooses to believe. But anyway, then we have the younger daughter, as we mentioned, and the youngest son, Lachlan, who's played by Sam Nivola, who plays exactly the same role, by the way, in The Perfect Marriage, which we just saw. And there's another thing I forgot to write down. But anyway, he runs the risk of being typecast because this is basically what he plays: nebbishy, awkward younger son. It's like his role in everything he's in.
He is kind of reminiscent of that nice guy character in season 2, right? Of White Lotus.
Yeah. Yeah, he's kind of a combination of Albie, who is more the nice guy who is trying too hard to be nice, and the awkward son in season 1 of The White Lotus, played by Fred Heckinger, who was great, by the way. I'm a big fan of Fred Heckinger in general, but he's really fun in that role too. Not as awkward as that character. Albie ends up, making some choices, and maybe he will too here over the course of the show. He has supposedly a big decision to make, to have some conversation with his family. He says about the colleges he wants to go to, but maybe we'll talk about it just briefly now here. There's some obviously really creepy sexual undertones in the sibling dynamic, which is very strange. You have Saxon mentioning to his brother that the sister is hot, but he doesn't think she's had sex with anybody yet. He's saying that the younger brother shouldn't share a room with the sister because now they have full-grown genitals. And then you have this like sexual tension between the two of them when he is talking about whether he should masturbate in front of him or not. I'm just like, what is going on with these siblings? None of this I want to watch, by the way.
That's what I'm saying. I don't want this. I don't want to know this. I don't want to see this. None of it.
I don't know what we're supposed to be getting from the Patrick Schwarzenegger character, in that he is trying to seduce them all. Has he been sexually abusive with them in the past? Questions I don't want answers to. It's really going to ruin the vibe of the fun of this show, to be honest with you. If that turns out to be the case, I don't want to see it.
I'm with you. I do feel like maybe the younger brother is in the closet. I don't know why.
Yes,
but I do.
I have that feeling as well. Well, first of all, I think that is what they're hinting at, but they're hinting at that so hard. And then the Patrick Schwarzenegger character, Saxon, the older brother, is trying so hard to be this macho dude that I'm like, oh, is this going to be the reversal where he's actually maybe the closeted character, right? So I'm starting to think that, they're making you look at one character, but it's actually the other one. It's just the fact that he's like basically like, I'm always on the prowl. I'm always on the prowl. I even think
Right.
my sister is hot. And I'm like, all right, chill, dude, chill. Don't try so hard.
Yeah, I mean, you would know as someone whose sister is beautiful how creepy that is. So,
I had people said some very creepy things to me about my sister when I was growing up, by the way. And I'm like, I am her brother. You do realize that, right? So that's the last thing I have here until, of course, surprise, Greg is here.
hmm
What a twist. I really was so happy by this twist. It made me wonder if we were in a different time frame on the show. It got my wheels spinning in ways that a lot of other elements of the show hadn't so far.
Interesting.
But I'm very curious to see what this indicates here for Greg. There's a lot of clues that get dropped here. He's dating Chloe, this actress,
Yes.
Charlotte DeBon, who I haven't seen before. Very pretty woman. Again, another one. Everybody's beautiful on the show, obviously. Not
Yes.
obviously, but in general. She has this conversation with Chelsea. They find out that they are in very similar situations. They decide to party and get drunk together. And she says, no, I'm with that guy, that loser back home, the guy with the red shirt on, orange shirt on. I feel like he always has an orange shirt on, by the way. And apparently they've been living here for a year. Is this since the Jennifer Coolidge's character's death a year ago? Or is this happening at the same time as the White Lotus season 2? I was curious. Do you have any idea where we're at in time right here?
Well, I had assumed we were moving sequentially in
Yeah.
time,
Mhm.
but as far as how much time has passed, that's a good question. Gosh, it's not something I considered at the time, and I don't have any real sense of it. I guess when is college decision season? I don't know the answer to that.
I think when we met Haley Lou Richardson as Jennifer Coolidge's
hmm
assistant in the
Assistant.
last season. I think she's in between. I think Albie is also on vacation before he goes back to school. Of course, they are as well, but it could be either one. It could be a whole year later, right? That would make
Right.
sense. Or it
Sure.
could be overlapping, right? Because we could have two calendars that are overlapping as well. It remains to be seen. I guess if Greg jumps on a plane
Right.
in the middle of the season to go visit his wife, then we know where we're at. I had some assumption. I don't know why. Maybe I was just jumping the gun. I assumed, given some of the revelations in season 2, that Greg was going to be found culpable for the deaths out there. Like that basically the plot would unravel pretty quickly. I don't know why I had that impression,
Hmm.
or if somebody,
So maybe he ran away to Thailand.
that's what I was thinking,
Yeah.
because I might be
Hmm.
misremembering that, but I could have sworn that there was something indicating that people knew that he had tried to kill his wife for the money. And I was like, oh man, Greg's going to be in trouble. So if this is if this is taking place in the future, then he might be on the run, like you said. He might just have some
Right.
cash reserves, and he's been holed up in that town. We know in the upcoming scenes that he wants to talk to Belinda, and of course,
Yes.
Belinda also had a relationship with that Jennifer Coolidge character. And so maybe he's been holed up there the whole time waiting for Belinda to show up. Maybe Belinda is going to inherit some of the money. That's what I was thinking, by the way. That might be a case. And maybe that might put a target on her as well if there was going to be some actual
Yeah.
intentional murder here. I think that they're laying out all those possible scenarios in this first episode of the show. And then what did you make about that final scene? Let's just circle back to the three ladies again before we wrap up. There is a lot of propping each other up, this kind of,
hmm
yeah, I'm sure you can speak to this even more than me, type of female friendship. Seems to be earnestly building each other up, but also somehow needing acknowledgement of their own success. Like, what did you think about that dynamic in those final moments? Especially Carrie Coon, like kind of exiting the conversation and then going and crying by herself in her room.
Yeah. I mean, I really felt for her. I feel like this might be true of all friendships. I'm only talking about women's friendships because that's where my experience is. They can be, not always, but can be so layered between the depth of the connection between you, but then also the need for validation and passive aggression that might come from that and needing to feel that you're enough. And sometimes you make yourself feel better by taking someone else down a peg. Just female friendships can be so complicated. And I think that's what we're hopefully going to examine here. That I think these three really do, I hope they really do love each other. But there's just so much other stuff that gets in the way that they end up, maybe saying passive aggressive mean things to each other. And
Yeah, I very much wanted to get your opinion of that. I think that is more that toxicity of the comparison. This is my stereotype, by the way, but I think that is much more prevalent among women than that is among men. But
it
of course,
feels
men
like
have
it
that too.
is.
Men have, we all have our own insecurities of, if I'd made this decision at a different point in my life, mostly career driven, where would I be here? Where would I be there? The what ifs of, your level of success and how you even qualify success, which I guess, the metrics might be different between men and women, but I think it's the same questions you ask yourself, right? These women in middle life that are saying like, maybe the actress feels like she didn't have a family. So maybe she earnestly does admire the fact that the Carrie Coon character has this relationship with her family, but maybe that family dynamic is more strained as it often happens to be, despite what it might appear itself on the surface. She probably not only sacrificed family, but maybe had a really rough time of like, you can only imagine many actresses like Carrie Coon, by the way, who don't really achieve success until their middle age. They probably really struggled for 10, 15 years, and
Mm-hmm,
everybody looking at them like she's never going to make anything of herself. And now
mm-hmm,
really basking in this success and people envying them, and then enjoying that fact that people envying them because for the longest time they were probably seen as misfits, right?
yeah,
So I think that dynamic is very interesting. I don't know if they've done enough with it here, but it's only episode one. So I am way more interested, to
yes,
your broader point, delving into that dynamic than I am in finding out who is the sexual predator within the
agree,
kids of that family.
agree.
And honestly, even knowing what tax evasion tactic he did and why he's running away from the Wall Street Journal reporter,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, none of that really, honestly, at this moment, none of that is interesting to me. But we'll all see. It will all develop. And I guess we'll have our preferred elements in the show. I've not seen ahead. I don't get any previews of this. Critics, most of the critics who reviewed the show, and the reviews have been positive, very positive, mention the fact that the family stuff is the strongest part of the show. Maybe Mike White is playing with our expectations in presenting them a certain way, and then maybe the story goes in a very different way. I do hope so. At this moment, not very intrigued by any of that.
Same.
And that all remains to be seen. Oh, did I ask you that already? Did you want to speculate on who was killed? Maybe it's
I
too early.
would never speculate on who was killed so early.
Too early for that. I'm sure there are people that we haven't even met yet that are going to be significant players in the show. Who knows who the murdered person is? And maybe there's even more than one. Who knows? We only saw one body, but there could be more than one.
True. There were so many gunshots.
Many, many gunshots. Those monkeys do not know how to shoot.
Say what you want about monkeys. They are poor marksmen.
They are usually poor marksmen. Maybe that's what Greg's been doing, training the monkeys
To do
for a
his dirty
year.
work.
Yeah, it could all backfire. No pun intended on him by the end. So, what'd you think about this episode? Like, how did you grade this episode, and what it makes you think about the season at this point?
I liked it. I would say for me, it was equivalent to the premiere of the second season. I have a lot of people that I'm interested in learning more about. And as we talked about, one set of people I would like to know less about. But on balance, there's a lot of people I'm interested in learning more about. And I think there's a lot of potential here. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with it.
I think there's a lot of potential. I would definitely rank this probably on par with the first episode of season one,
Hmm.
but well beneath the first episode of season two,
Hmm.
where even though all those characters in season two, almost all of them, not all of them, but almost all of them, were significantly different, the payoffs were significantly different than I expected. at the beginning, which I think is kind of the trick of the show, the magic of the show. I was equally vested in almost every single character in that first season of the show, or that second, I should say, after the first episode of the second season, and honestly loved, I'd say, a handful of the characters after episode 1. And I couldn't wait to see what was going to happen with them. And I don't think I have that affinity for any of the characters at this point. I'm intrigued. I mean, I'm curious to see what happens, but I'm not in love with any of these characters yet at all. And maybe something I've never had on the show before, I aggressively want to see less. Like, I'm actually hoping that the central family dynamic in this episode is not going to continue to be the focus of the show ongoing.
Agree.
Which I have never had that feeling for the previous 2 seasons. So, but there's definitely things I like here. I'm looking forward to it, but not in love with this first episode.
I don't know if I'm in love, but I'm in
Like
a very secure like. Yes.
There you go. I think you probably also like the dynamic of the 3 women more than I did. I found it intriguing.
That would make sense. Right.
I felt like there is potential there. I didn't connect yet with these characters.
Yeah, fair.
I think that's all I have. So thanks again, Sona, for the conversation.
Thank you.
And we will be talking about Severance, episode 6. Actually, episode 6.
For real.
For real this week. And also Parasite. I mean, Paradise. Paradise, episode 6. Just in a couple of days, we'll have that episode in the feed. Stay tuned for all of that. And of course, if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do. And a little bonus content there. Sona and I will be discussing something. It probably will just be one of these episodes, but in face-to-face, where we'll show our faces there. We'll see each other's faces too, because Sona and I do not turn our cameras on normally when we record, just voices.
Yeah, a couple of times we did it and we were kind of like, this is weird. Let's turn the cameras back
I don't know where I'm supposed to be looking. Yeah. But we'll get used to it if we decide to make those episodes ongoing. But subscribe to us. If we get to 100 subscribers, we will do a video episode. And then we'll decide if we get traction on those. Maybe we'll keep doing them. We'll have to wait and see. All right, Sona, thanks again for the conversation. And I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Take care.
All right, bye.
Bye.